only looking at that date of birth to make sure they are who they say they are, and to think about things in my head that we know we need to start watching or looking for. But really, what matters the most is how someone feels physically, mentally, spiritually, and what they're able to do in their daily life, function in activity. Are you doing the things that you love to do? Are there things that I can help you achieve so that you can do more of what you love to do? And so really, that is how we define healthy and successful aging, is having a place or being at a place in life, physically, mentally, and spiritually, where you're able to go and do the things that you like to do and achieve the things that you want to achieve. So just a couple thoughts about how to achieve this from a health perspective. You're going to hear about the spiritual perspective, the ministry and service perspective today. You're going to hear some information on disaster planning. But my job is to talk a little bit about health. So getting your normal appointments is super important. Making sure that you're following along with those guidelines. Also, making sure that we eat healthy. And sometimes that's harder than what it seems. Food is expensive now, and healthy food can be even more expensive. So we try and partner with different community groups who we can identify have some either support mechanisms, either food banks. A lot of churches have food closets or food pantries. But trying to identify places in your community that you can get access to those healthier foods. Have any of you seen the documentary on Netflix called The Blue Zones? So a couple of you have. Part of that eating healthy and successfully aging long into our later years comes from eating well. And it's challenging because you have to be able to get the food and cook it too, for the most part. And I'm not a very good cook. I'm trying, I'm learning. The other two pieces are sleeping well. It is really hard to get good sleep. I think good sleep is underestimated in our general population. But sleeping well is very important. It's when our brain detoxes. When we sleep, it goes around and it takes away all the ugliness from the day and it shunts it out somewhere else. And so it helps our bodies function well. It helps our memory. It helps our mood. So being able to sleep is key. I know that's a lot easier said than done, and we can talk about that at some point if you like. But the other piece is moving often, and this will probably help you sleep better too. Being up and around as much as you can in whatever way works for you is important for your body. These two are really the two items that I wanted to challenge you for today. One is finding your purpose. And because you're sitting here today, it tells me that you already have some type of purpose or calling, even if that's just to find more knowledge for yourself. That's a purpose. Because you're striving to successfully age, to be healthy, to find out how to serve others. Finding that purpose is so important for all of us. And there are things that happen over the course of our lives that may change our path or our journey a little bit. And maybe we're not able to do the things that we thought we'd be able to do. So trying to reframe or find other ways to find your purpose is important. I'll tell you a funny story really quickly. It's funny to me, I suppose. But my father-in-law and my mother-in-law live with us. They have a little apartment that's attached to our house, and it's worked really well over the past 15 years because when my children were little, they were able to play and take care of them after school, and my mother-in-law is a fantastic cook, and everyone likes her cooking. I will never measure up, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. But now that we're 15 years down the road, we're doing a little bit more of the cooking. We're spending time over there playing games. But my father-in-law loves to work in his wood shop. He has a little brick building outside, probably about 75 yards down the driveway. And his whole goal every day is to get out and work in his workshop. And his mood, you can tell when I walk in at the end of the day of whether he's been in the wood shop or not. I can also tell by the plethora of things that are spread around the apartment that he's made. So I got a call last Thursday around this season, fall, he starts building things for Christmas because he likes to sell them at fairs and things like that. And so I got a call Thursday night. Are you home yet? I said, not yet, but I will be in a little bit. Well, I need you to come see me. And I'm not sure I've ever been told to come see him ever. And so I was a little afraid of what I might find when I came over there. But what I found was the entire apartment, every space of countertop, table was covered in handcrafted Christmas trees. And all different kinds. There were some that are built with little 2x4s cut, and they're just at different angles. There were some that were straight pieces of plywood that were cut at certain angles. Some were stained, some were decorated, some were painted. My mother-in-law just looked at me like, help! And so he said, I need to have a garage sale. We need to have a sale. And I said, well, you know, our house is kind of out. And I said, how about if we find a fair for you to go to? And so he said, okay. So one of my best friends had a garage sale that week, last weekend. He loaded up every single thing. And he got up early and drove over and sat and sold those trinkets all day long. If you ask me, he's asking a little much. He needs to come down on his prices. But he had the best day, the best few days getting ready for that sale. That, to him, is his purpose. He now has money for his visits during the week and things that he wants to do. He's got a little money for Christmas. It's the small things, really, really small things that make a big difference. Since then, he sends me texts throughout the day with pictures of how much do you think this would sell for. And so whatever it is, it doesn't matter if it seems like it means something to someone else. If it means something to you, it's important. So thank you for being here today. The next piece of that is challenging your brain. I think it's pretty obvious that we need to challenge our brains. However, the ways in which we do that may not be so obvious. You hear a lot of recommendations for things like crossword puzzles or card games, and all of those things are great. Reading the newspaper, or if it's online now, but something that you're doing each day to work your brain. Learning a new language may seem really tough, but it's a great time to do it. I have a couple languages I'd love to learn when I have a chance. Learning to play a new musical instrument. All of those things keep your brain working day in and day out and challenging. Your brain needs that challenge. There's a study a long time ago about the GPS that we use on our phones or in our cars that has taken the place of maps. And that has really challenged our brains in some ways, and not in a good way, but in a bad way, because when we hear the instructions, our brain is not thinking through the instructions. Our brain says, well, I can sleep because I'm going to hear the instruction to turn right up there, and it's going to tell me how many feet. But when you don't have that instruction telling you, you're actually having to critically think yourself about how to get from point A to point B. So if you know where you're going, go ahead and flip that off and just enjoy the silence and not the person talking to you all the time. Socialization, again, is huge. It's another piece that you wouldn't necessarily think about when we talk about healthy aging. But being in groups of people like this, playing cards with groups of people, having your Bible study, all of those things really make a difference, especially when we talk about our spiritual health. Loneliness is, studies show that it's equivalent to being a 30-pack per year smoker if you're lonely. They can have devastating effects on your health. And it's really hard to understand or imagine that, because you think, well, if I'm doing something that's not good for my body, loneliness isn't the same thing. I'm fine at home. But in essence, you're not. We know that God calls us to be together in community with people. Hence the title of our series, which is Building Community with Older Adults. Finally, what matters most. So I always talk about this in a way of we want to think about our health and our plans for our lives from a health perspective. What plans we have if something were to happen to us and we're not able to communicate. But really, it's much smaller than that. The big things are important, of course, but each one of us, just like we're all aging, each one of us has separate thoughts and ideas on how we want to live our lives and where we want to plan for later on in life. So what matters most, I like to think about a bagel or coffee or any of those things. But if you're a person that likes bagels or eats bagels, you know, different people like different kinds. For me, you know, a plain bagel goes a long way, especially if I'm hungry. There are others who say, no, I absolutely have to have a blueberry bagel or nothing. Some people like the everything bagel. They want everything on it they can possibly get. Everyone is different. It's the same way with the way we take our breakfast drinks or our food. You have to figure out, when it comes to your health, what matters most to you. Does it matter most to you to live near family? Does it matter most to you to spend your last days at home or in a hospital or a facility? The time is now to make those decisions. Even for me, even for my 21-year-old, we have these conversations. It is incredibly important to work on what matters most to you from a long-term perspective, but also each day. What matters most to my father-in-law is being able to physically walk from his house to his shop every day. And so if he has a fall or if something happens where he's been in the hospital, what we tell physical therapy is the goal is that he gets in that wood shop down the driveway. And every time, that's what we work towards. So what matters most to you is very important, and it's important that you're able to verbalize that. Many people have fears and concerns, but we also have our values and belief systems. So all of those things together, it takes some time to process. If I asked each of you right now what matters most to you, you might be able to tell me at least some of the basics. But if I ask you to line out the next 5 or 10 years of your life, that takes a little time to think about. The other important thing is to tell the people who you love the most what matters most to you. It might seem a little selfish, but honestly, it's the greatest gift you can give those that you love, because they don't have to question if something sudden happens, if there's a disaster looming. They know exactly what matters most to you, and they can make decisions accordingly. And then making sure that that plan is written down is, of course, important. You'll hear from Laura Brown this afternoon, who's going to give us some tools to do that. Many of you may have some legal documents in place already, but you're just curious about whether they're going to be effective or not. Laura is a great person to bounce some questions off of and listen to her comments about things like wills and powers of attorney and what is really important to make sure that you have on hand. So things to do for others as we wrap up. We just talked a lot about things that you can do for yourself. The fact that you're here, I'm just going to take a hunch and say that you probably enjoy serving others as well. It is very important that we all take time to advocate for each other, that we make sure we bring awareness to things that are important in our communities, whether that be making sure that we have the infrastructure to sustain some sort of flood or hurricane or tornado or anything like that. Or maybe it's that you feel like you need a good older adult ministry, not only in your church, but maybe you want to start reaching out to the community around you and ministering to people in your neighborhoods. It's important that we do our research and make sure that information we share with each other is correct, but also to find the resources and support in our communities to get people help that they need. I've already talked about today's opportunities. We're going to hear about older adult ministry. We're going to talk about congregational care, some legal issues. We're going to get into disaster readiness, and we have an activity at the end of the day for you. And we'll also hear about frauds and scams, which is super important. I think you'll find that as one of the most interesting presentations. Well, excuse me, Dr. The second most interesting presentation that you have. The third, sorry, John's here too. It's very interesting. They're all great, but I think you'll be shocked. Let me put it that way. I think you will learn a lot of new things in that one. All right, so we're going to get started. We're going to transition over to the Reverend Dr. Rick Gensler, and we're going to help bring him up here and get going. It works. Oh, okay. Okay. And then we will go from there. Thank you all. Oh, and you've all mostly found, but there's refreshments at the back, and then you've got some waters at your table. When we have the breaks, we've got some resources out in the hall for you. Most of you probably saw that when you came in the door. They'll be here at least through lunch, so make sure you take time to talk with some of those. When we talk about resources and support, those are kind of our top picks for this area. So we're excited to have them and appreciate those groups being here as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wick. Let us thank Christy. And I don't know if this is coming through yet or not. Is it coming through? Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for being here this morning. And to everybody who is watching, we have hundreds of folks who are engaged in this program today online. But I thank everyone who took the time to come in person. Many of you I know, and it's a joy to see you once again. But I also need to, before I begin, just to make a few quick comments. This is our third event, co-sponsoring with the University of Tennessee Chattanooga School of Nursing. And we could not have had a better team than with Dr. Wick and with Stephanie. They have truly been a blessing for the church, for Encore Ministry Foundation, and we certainly can't thank them enough for all that we are able to do together. Our first event was last fall at First United Methodist Church in Franklin, Tennessee. Then we decided, well, maybe we ought to take the show on the road, and we went to Memphis to Mullins United Methodist Church in April. And Bill Wheeler, who is a member of the board of Encore Ministry Foundation, Bill, just wave your hand, the handsome dude in that white suit. Bill was saying for years, Rick, we've got to do something up in the Clarksville area. We've got to have an event. And so with Bill's encouragement, we decided, let's go to Madison Street United Methodist Church here in Clarksville. And we are so delighted to be here and so grateful that you're taking the time to be with us today. I also want to call attention that we have with us, I don't know where Pat may have gone out to. Yeah, is Pat the district superintendent? Yeah. Well, here's Pat Brandenstein. Pat is going to be with us. Pat is a member of the board, but I was calling attention to the Reverend Pat Freudenthal, who is the DS. Oh, and she just stepped out. Okay. We're grateful that she is with us. We're grateful that, where's Charles? Charles Hughley and his lovely wife, Gwen. Charles, raise your hand, Charles, so people can see you. Charles is the president of the Encore Ministry Board of Directors. And he's our boss, you know, along with Gwen. I mean, they both help us in so many ways. In the back is Michael Lawrence and his lovely wife, Joanna. Michael is the chair of the program committee. So he oversees the programs that Encore Ministry Foundation guide. Sitting next to him is the Reverend John Collette. John Collette was one of the founders of Encore Ministry in the very, very beginning. And just delighted. I called attention to Pat Brandenstein, who is going to be a part of the Congregational Care Ministry and talk about her Wings of Hope ministry that I know you'll find very interesting. There are some of the board members. I want to introduce you to our new executive director, John Rivas. John has been with us now a year, and we are delighted by his presence. He's a visionary. He's guiding us in so many wonderful ways for Encore Ministry Foundation. And now the real boss for Encore Ministry Foundation is sitting back at that table, Cindy Solomon. Cindy, please raise, or stand up. Okay, Cindy. We could not do anything without Cindy Solomon, that's for sure. And grateful to each and every one of you. And we're going to just begin at this particular time. We're going to talk a little bit further about what Dr. Wick was just talking about a few moments ago and kind of pushing a little bit further. what we're going to learn today is many churches are graying. You know that. You're probably beating yourself up sometimes because of it, but I hope after today you won't be doing so. Ageism and its impact on older adults and the churches. That's the reality in our society, unfortunately. The role of the church in an aging society and phases of aging that can be helpful for our ministry. And finally, various older adult ministry models, ideas for ministry, and a few selected resources. Now, and I see some of you are diligently taking notes, and I applaud your efforts. But I do want to share with you that you would be able to get the whole PowerPoint. So if you miss something, if you miss it, you can get the PowerPoint off of our website after the presentation. That will be available, and it will be free. Let's begin. The righteous flourish like a palm tree and grow like a cedar in Lebanon. In old age, they still produce fruit. They are always green and full of sap. Found in Psalm 92, verses 12 and 14. That to me is a very powerful psalm that we overlook. In old age, they still produce fruit. They're still engaged. They're green. They're full of life and sap. They're active in what they do. And we have to sometimes help older adults remember this particular passage of Scripture, which is thousands of years old, but is important for us in our world today. And welcome back, Pat. I introduced you in your absence and thank you for being here as the district superintendent for Red River District. Thank you. A rapidly changing world. We do live in a world that is rapidly changing. Probably one of the greatest challenges that we face is our aging population. In 1900, persons who were 65 years of age and over represented only 4% of the total population, where children and youth under the age of 18 represented 40%. So over 124 years ago, older adults, 1 out of 25. Think about that in a church. Let's look at a little Methodist church of, let's say, of 100 people. Maybe 4 of them would have been over 65 years of age. Almost half of them would have been under the age of 18. By 2000, the 65 years of age and over has grown to 12.5% of the total population. Children under the age of 18, 24. So 24 years ago, roughly, in the United States, 1 out of 8 persons, now 65 years of age and over, and 1 out of 4 under the age of 18. But by 2035, that's 11 years from now, by roughly 2035, the population of 65 years of age and older will outnumber children and youth under the age of 18, a first in our history. That's how much our rapidly changing demographics is impacting not only our society, but is impacting our churches as well. And that's just a graph from the U.S. Census Bureau showing that by the year 2035, the blue line or green line is continuing to climb, and the under 18 red line is continuing to decrease. So that the aging population in the United States is growing. That's a reality. That's a fact. And we have to help our congregations, as well as our communities, understand the dynamics that's impacting us when back in the 1960s, all we thought about were all those boomer kids coming along. Now those boomer kids are now boomer older adults. That's a reality in our society. Most congregations are graying, with advances due to biology, neuroscience, healthcare, technology, lifestyle changes, more people are living longer than ever before. The issue is not about whether churches will continue to grow old. They will. They will. It's about what do we do now as it's happening? What do we do as it happens? Reaching young people is vital for the building of the kingdom, obviously. Obviously. But churches that beat themselves up for not having young people may miss out on ministry opportunities presented by the very people sitting in their pew, older adults. And that's because of ageism. That's because of ageism. Did you know today is Ageism Awareness Day? October 9, 2024. Now, when we planned this event, we weren't even thinking that this was going to be Ageism Awareness Day. But it just so happens that it is. Today is Ageism Awareness Day. And honestly, I didn't know it until I got my information from the American Society on Aging, which has been promoting it. Ageism refers to stereotypes, in other words, how we think. Prejudice, how we feel. And discrimination, how we act. Really based or toward others based on age. If you want to know more about Ageism Awareness Day, I put that on just simply since today is Ageism Awareness Day. And you can go to that site and pull up resources and information that could help you. But you've got to do it quickly because it's today. We won't deal with ageism after today. No, no, not at all. Because ageism is an ingrained bias. Our culture struggles with ageism, which is an ingrained bias in our society that permeates all aspects of our lives. There's the assumption that people aged 65 years of age and older, unlike younger ages, are all the same and undifferentiated, that their lives are in decline and not fulfilling, not interesting. That's ageism. And I bet everybody who's in this room today who is 65 and over would dispute that. Our lives are interesting and very fulfilling in many ways. But ageism, like racism, sexism, homophobia, and anti-Semitism, is another form of bigotry deeply ingrained in societal perceptions. And the church, unfortunately, is not immune to ageism. Sadly so, and should not be. The image of an aging congregation is often seen as outdated and closed-minded, living steadfastly in the past, hindering church growth, and quite honestly, simply dying. I can remember back when I was a pastor in my own annual conference up in central Pennsylvania, and I was the coordinator for older adult ministries for our conference. The bishop asked me on several occasions to talk to certain pastors who were being appointed to specific churches because it was an older congregation and they felt that they were being punished because they were being assigned to a congregation of older adults. Now, that was 30-some years ago, and I doubt that Pat ever has a problem in appointing from her district any pastors to congregations of older adults today. Again, that was back in the 70s and the 80s, and certainly. But anyway, ageism causes faith communities to neglect the spiritual and the psychosocial needs of older adults. And older adults may often feel overlooked and undervalued by church leaders. Particularly when so much of the emphasis is on reaching young people, engaging in ministry with children. And sometimes that emphasis becomes so clear that even older adults in a congregation believe that, oh, it's not about us. God doesn't care about us. God really only cares about children and youth, as important as children and youth are. But when we never lift up the needs, the concerns, the interests of older adults, we begin to believe that our lives as older persons no longer matter or are valued by the church. There was a study done at, this happened to be at Duke University and not at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. But there was a study done a few years ago at Duke University through the medical school that I think is fantastic and exciting information about religious involvement in older adults. And in this scientific study, they discovered that older adults who were involved in the religious practice had better physical health, reduced need for health services, including hospital stays, had less depression, coped better with stress, greater concern for others, increased contact with social support networks, had a greater sense of well-being. All if they were involved in a religious practice. It did not matter if it was the United Methodist Church. It did not matter if it was a Baptist church. It did not matter if it was a Catholic church. It did not matter if it was a Jewish synagogue. The scientific study discovered that it was, if they were involved, older persons were involved in religious practice in whatever interfaith, let alone ecumenical group, they had all of these things as more positive than persons who were not participating in a religious activity. And if you want to see the study, it is found in Faith in the Future, Healthcare, Aging, and the Role of Religion by Harold Koenig, who is a medical doctor, and Douglas Lawson, PhD in sociology. And so their study, I just think that's fantastic when we think about that. If we lift that up in our churches and say, you know, if we have our older adults involved in these things, look at the reality. They have better physical health, less need even for health systems, less depression, cope better with stress, and so on and so forth. Older adults and well-being, Dr. Wick mentioned this just a few moments ago. Well-being does involve more than just good physical health, financial security, and social support. It involves meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose. As individuals enter the later life, questions about meaning and purpose take on a whole new definition, a whole new power. When I was working, I had this kind of goal, purpose, meaning in my life. When my husband was living or my wife was living, I had this purpose. When those life challenges and transitions change for us, they also change the meaning and the purpose that we may have in life. And we can't just pass over that and gloss over it. Whether we're clergy or whether we're laypersons, helping older persons in our congregation grapple with meaning and purpose as the challenges and the transitions of life impact who we are and how we live. For many older adults, it's the religious practices and beliefs that help them get through, help them find a significant well-being in their life. Unfortunately, when older adults see little interest directed at them by the church, they gradually lose their sense of having value and worth, which dampens and diminishes their faith and spiritual development. Sad. But that's what ageism does to us. That's what ageism presents to us. That, well, we're growing old. Their life is going downhill. Who wants to be an older adult? You know. George Carlin did a really interesting study of this. Do you remember George Carlin? Probably couldn't tell many of his stories in a church. Okay? But he did tell, about how aging impacts us at different times in our life. You ask a little child, how old are you? A little child will say, I'm 4.5. I'm 4.5. Child can't wait to be 5. Ask a 9-year-old, I can't wait to be 10, to put two numbers. I'm not just 9, I'm now going to be 10. Or a 12-year-old, I can't wait to be 13. A 15-year-old, I can't wait to be 16 so I can drive a car. Now, maybe in Tennessee you can do it at 15. In Pennsylvania, you had to be 16 to be able to do that. But I couldn't wait to be 16 in my life. I could not wait to be 16 to drive a car. And then I couldn't wait to be 18 to be out of high school and off to college. I couldn't wait to be out of high school. And I was very active in high school, but I was looking so forward to being 18 because I turned 18 in May and I would graduate in early June. And boy, once I was 18, I knew I'm going to be out of high school and getting ready for college. And then I couldn't wait to be 21 in Pennsylvania. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. Oh, 21, yeah. Well, it could have been at 21 at that time, I couldn't wait to vote. I couldn't wait to vote. Political science was my major, so social science. But that really wasn't the reason. You were right in the first time. And then we get to a point. Where we say, Martha, I can't believe the pastor asked me my age. I just can't believe that. Now, sitting right here, where is she? Where's Alita? There's Alita. Alita is celebrating her birthday today, and I know exactly how old she is. Yeah, there you go. And so we get to that point in our life. When we are middle-aged, we don't want people to know how old we are. But then we get, I'm going to be 80 today. Or I'm going to be 92 tomorrow. It sets a different dynamic for us, doesn't it? Congregational transformation in an age of demographic longevity, which is what we're experiencing in the United States, in Italy, in Spain, in Japan, in Korea. Throughout the world, much of the world is experiencing a demographic longevity. And so, in order to grapple with that as a congregation, we have to reimagine church vitality. If we only think that a church can be vital if we are loaded every Sunday morning with children and youth, and we don't have that opportunity to have many children and youth in our church, we might just miss the grand opportunity of being in ministry in our communities with older adults. We have to reimagine church vitality and not beat ourselves up. We have to rethink our own personal ageist views. Like, oh, I shouldn't do that. After all, I'm retired. Or I shouldn't wear purple and a red hat because, now that I'm over 65, people will think I look foolish. Whatever it is, we have to rethink our own personal ageist views. And taking risk at any age is important. Not unnecessary, harmful risk, Like my wife, 76, still says, "Dear, I'd like to learn how to ski, downhill ski." And yes, that's exactly what I say to her. That's exactly what I say to her. Now, come on. Reframing aging with a new vision. Aging can be an exciting, wonderful, challenging, fulfilling aging as we get older. So let's not be ageist, let's promote it. Reframe aging with a new vision and going on finding ways to celebrate and utilize the contributions, faithfulness, and wisdom of older adults. And recognizing that we live in a time when aging is an opportunity and not an end. An opportunity and not an end. Building community with older adults, which is what our theme is for today and has been throughout the year. As older adults and leaders in older adult ministry, we need to help our churches see aging and older adulthood as an opportunity for faithful ministry rather than as a burden. Something that just needs to be done to placate older persons. But as a wonderful opportunity. Building community with older adults begins when congregations become intentional in ministry by older adults, with older adults and others, and for older adults. An intentional ministry. And intentionality involves inviting, empowering, and equipping older adults to make significant contributions in its ministry. Ways your congregation can make a difference: overcome the temptation to view all older adults as exactly alike. Because older adults aren't. Every older person is unique and different. Recognize that older adults have had different and unique life experiences, and that no two older adults are alike. If you've seen one older adult, you've seen one older adult. That's all. Learn to appreciate the positive aspects and unique challenges of your congregation. And recognize that aging is not a problem to be solved, contrary to some medical area. Not a problem to be solved for the church. It's a gift to be embraced. That we have persons of longevity with wisdom, faith experience, who can help guide the community, can help guide children and youth and middle-aged persons and other older adults. That it is not a problem to be solved by the church, but one to be celebrated as a gift to be embraced. So, how do we do it? Well, if you don't have an organized, intentional older adult ministry, start by having a team. I would say, 5, 6, 7, 8 persons that have an interest in older adult ministry. Bring them together. Start by taking one person out to lunch if you need to. And say, "Martha, what are you thinking? We have all these older adults and they're complaining we're not doing something. What is your thinking?" Well, start talking about it. Bring others together until you have a group that really are concerned about issues related to aging within the community and within your church. Then do a survey of the older adults in your church and recognize a service analysis of resources in your community. Know what your community has, resources available for aging and older adults. Review the results of your survey, identify a need your church can take on, and plan an event for both members and people who are not members, who are older in your church. And then survey those who attended. Do an evaluation. And out of that, you may be able to open the door and begin an intentional ministry. Just a few simple steps to get yourself started. And it is more fully explained in the life of the book, An Age of Opportunity, if you have that you may want to scan that and help give yourself some guide. Well, this is what I think is important and what I found important anyway when I was a pastor in the church. Instead of thinking about persons by age, chronological age, which is helpful in some ways, I don't want to demean or dismiss that. I found it a different way of thinking about older adult ministry in my own congregation. The first phase is the active phase. You have older members. They might be 65 years of age. They might be 75 years of age. They might be 80 years of age. They might be 95 years of age, who are active in your church. You count on them. You see them. They're engaged. They're out there traveling. They're doing the Rhodes Scholar. They're taking a class at Austin P. They're just so thoroughly involved in the community. You have them in your church. They're the ones you see. They're the ones you turn to for leadership. But then you have those that are slipping into the passive phase. Their health is changing. I noticed this myself. We used to live in Nashville, and 17 years ago we moved from Nashville out to a community that's really not a small community anymore, Gallatin, which is really growing. But gradually I have been changing my medical doctors from Nashville out to Hendersonville and Gallatin. Why? I don't like driving into Nashville anymore. I just don't. I'll drive all around, but I get tired of driving into Nashville. It drives me nuts. I'm much more of a rural person, I guess, than I am a city slicker in that. So I see myself slowing down. I don't want to drive into Nashville if I don't have to. The last one to change will be my dermatologist, and I have that appointment coming up in another week or so. And if once I get that one nailed down, I'll have all the medical people I need right there. But slowing down, we have persons who are slowing down. And it may be that Martha is caring for George, her husband. And so she's in the passive phase right now because of George's life. But if George becomes healthy and active again, they both may move into the active phase. If not, and George dies, then Martha is dealt with a particular dilemma. Do I get back active again, or do I become, in the final phase, homebound? Which happens sometimes. And Pat can tell us all about that from Wings of Hope. That can happen to widows once their husbands die, whether or not they become active again or whether they become homebound. So that's the final phase, the no-goes, where our health problems restrict mobility, home health care services, alternative housing, maybe. Those are three phases that you have in your church. You have older adults who are active, that you count on, that you lean on, that you turn to. And you have those that are now slowing down, that are becoming a bit more passive, that you don't see them as often. Maybe there's transitions going on either in their own personal life or around them that's changing, that they're becoming more passive. And you have your homebound. You have your final phase. Keep that in mind. Because that's going to take us to this. Seniors ministry that I developed in the church that I was serving before I moved to Nashville. Seniors ministry is based upon this: spirituality, enrichment, nutrition, wellness, intergenerational outreach, recognition, and service. And so when you think about your church, think about your ministries. Think about your ministries. Much of what we do in the church is here. The go-goes. That's easy for us to do. All our ministries are oftentimes with the go-goes. How are we engaged with our slow-goes and our no-goes in terms of spirituality, in terms of enrichment needs, in terms of wellness, nutrition, intergenerational, Outreach. Do we even outreach? Do we reach out to these people? Do we reach out to others who may be living in long-term care settings? Are we reaching out to them? Or because they can't come to church, we don't reach out to them? I think that's really a travesty. A lot of church leaders miss a wonderful opportunity in these areas for ministry. Maybe they don't fit the statistic bill well enough on our church records. I don't know. But I think so often, so much of our ministry takes place here, and we miss here. And we miss those areas. So it's just an assessment. This is not to say whether your church is doing an excellent job in any particular area. No church does. Even the Church of the Resurrection, they're outside of Kansas City, one of the largest United Methodist churches. Probably if we put that up, they would say there's a failing in something that they're doing with their older adults. And that's a large church. So it's not meant to do that. It's not meant to say good or bad. It's just an assessment tool to see where your strengths are and where your weaknesses might be. Ministry models with churches, adult ministry model like a Sunny Day Club for respite care. Persons who are experiencing memory loss will come to the church for the day in a safe place, while the primary caregiver has an opportunity to spend the day not providing care. Whether it's just going shopping, reading a book, whatever. Another ministry model that exists in United Methodist churches throughout the country is the congregational care model. Where you may have Stephen ministries in the church that do visitation, or you have a parish nurse, respite care, a team that visits the homebound, relational model, social gatherings, fellowship, luncheons, day trips. So many of our churches that have an older adult ministry center on that. Now that's an important one. I mean, relational, staying connected, as Dr. Wick shared earlier, is so important, staying connected. So I don't want to dismiss that, but some churches say, well, all they do is have lunches, and we want to think of something more. We want to think of something more. Service and missions model, going to the school and painting classrooms. Some older adult ministry groups do that. They'll go to the elementary school, for example, and paint classrooms in the summertime when the school is not in session. Habitat for Humanity, Meals on Wheels, Volunteers in Mission. Study model, where their older adults are engaged in study, Bible study, book club, Sunday school classes, Ventures in Learning. And support group model, like Wings of Hope, as an example for widows, cancer stroke survivor ministry, just supporting needs of people, grandparents raising grandchildren support group. Those are the kinds of models that I've witnessed when I worked at the General Board of Discipleship and traveled across the churches, the types of ministry models that exist in the United Methodist Church. Okay? Some churches have more than one. Some churches have only one. It's just an idea to trigger something perhaps in your own thinking about ministry. What are characteristics of intentional older adult ministry? There's an older adult ministry leadership team. You don't have a person, you don't say, Martha, we want you to be the coordinator for older adult ministry. So now Martha is expected to do it all herself. There's a team. There's a team. Needs, interests, and abilities of older adults are known and utilized. Training is ongoing and provided, just like we're doing today, with all these options that people have an opportunity to learn and listen from folks who are coming in and will be talking to us throughout the day. Laity serve as program champions and guide the ministry. Laity are the champions of older adult ministry. It's not waiting for the pastor. So often we say, well, I wish we could get our pastor involved. No, the pastor's busy. The pastor has 101 things to do in a 24-hour period. This is our ministry. Laity take on the ministry and become the champions to help guide it. Older adult ministry has a line item in the church budget, and we're not embarrassed to push it. So often we think, oh, we ought not do that. We need children's budget. We need a youth budget. And we think all older adults are rich. All older adults are wealthy. Who came up with that idea? It's really, it's sad commentary on our ageism that exists in the church, where we think, oh, the older adults don't need that. No. Where are you getting off when you're thinking? The generalization causes more trouble. Various ministry options are available, knowing that one type of ministry program does not reach all older adults. Does not reach all older adults. Am I doing okay on my time? Oh, good. Thank you. I don't have. Thank you. The options, we used to think that with youth group, and we realized that didn't work. Sometimes we think, well, we have this lunch. We have this lunch. Every Wednesday we have a lunch for seniors, for older adults. And we're only getting 20 people coming out. And when I ask around in the church, because we have so many more older adults in our church that are not coming out, and some people have shared, well, I'm not coming out with all those old people. Or, I'm on a diet and I can't eat what that is. Or at noon, I'm not even up and dressed yet by that. I mean, there's so many. So if we think that, okay, we're offering one ministry to reach all the older adults, is foolhardy. With youth, we used to think, well, if we have a pizza party on Sunday night, okay, so we have a pizza party on Sunday night, oh, the youth are going to want to come out to that. Who doesn't like pizza after all? All the kids are going to want to come out. Only to find out that Jimmy is dating Susan, and her Baptist church has a service at that hour, and so he's dating Susan, so he's going to go to her church for the service that night at that Baptist church. Billy, he's at the pizza parlor making the pizza for the youth group, and Jane, she's visiting her grandparents who live, 2 cities away, and they always get together on Sunday. So our thinking was, well, if we have a pizza party, all the kids are going to come out. No, they're not. And we realized the mistakes we made. Realize the mistakes we make with older adults when we think we offer one older adult ministry model, a Bible study, Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and expect all older adults to be out. And if they're not, we beat ourselves up and say, what book of the Bible could we study that would get all of it? Try something different. Try something different. Okay. Characteristics continuing. Community resources are known and used. Community resources are known. You know what resources are available in your community that would benefit older adults. Intergenerational opportunities are intentional and not happenstance. You plan ministry together, old and young. And you think, oh, the young aren't going to care. Oh, you'd be surprised at how much young people enjoy hearing what the older adults share about their life experiences and faith journeys. Church facilities are accessible. So you don't hold your Bible study on one floor and the restrooms are on another, as an example. Incontinence is a reality for many of us as we're growing older. Now, maybe if I talk to Dr. Wick, she could help me understand that there could be a solution to my incontinence. I don't know. But those things do matter to older adults, and they don't want to embarrass themselves. And we should not place them in situations where they could embarrass and be embarrassed. The ministry reaches out into the community. It's not just around the 4 walls. It really is reaching out into the full community. Evaluation is regular and ongoing. We evaluate. We look at what we're doing. Are we making a difference? And we just don't keep doing it if it doesn't work. An older adult ministry that is not intentional, I believe, is not likely to make much of a difference at all if it's not intentional. Role of the local church in older adult ministry: help older adults stay connected. Help them stay connected. Social connection is so important. Dr. Wicks said about the smoking the cigarettes it's harmful for if people would smoke. I'm not going to get this quite right, but loneliness is just if detrimental to one's health as if they're smoking a pack of Lucky Strikes or Marlboros or something every day. Help older adults find meaning and purpose in later years. Help them find meaning and purpose in later years. Provide opportunities for meaningful service and missions within the community and beyond. Empower older adults for outreach, being engaged in the community. Kathy Burkhead, who's here, her husband Joe, has a ramp ministry, older adults building ramps, putting ramps in for people in their home. What a powerful ministry that can make to people. You'd think that's just a ministry like that how Joe captured that vision and has a team helping them do that. Finding ways of reaching out into the community and being engaged. Engage older adults in spiritual growth and faith development because we need it. We need it. The challenges that we face are real. The transitions that we encounter as we grow older can stop a beating heart. No, I don't have to deal with acne anymore. Thank God. But we do face the other realities of aging. And so I don't want to diminish that. Engage older adults that there is a strength greater than their own. A strength greater than who we are that can help us over the divide, that can help us face the challenges ahead. Role of the local church continued. Help older adults model positive aging and practice generativity, giving back to succeeding generations and wanting to give back. That's from Eric Erickson, those of you who are gurus of Eric Erickson, the generativity. In worship, provide older adults with familiar religious symbols, hymns, and rituals to support their continuing identity. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have new songs that you sing or, little songs. They're wonderful, and older adults sometimes enjoy those as well. What I'm getting at is, if I came to Jesus singing these songs, I'd like to be able to sing them again in worship from time to time, because that's how I came to Jesus. And if I no longer sing those songs anymore, it's like there's a disconnect for me. Is my faith no longer valid, unimportant? So yes, it's great to do new things. Older adults need to learn new things, want to learn new things. We are learning people. Humanity is constantly learning. But there's a sense that as we age, that the familiarity just helps us over those rough edges sometimes of life. So don't ignore those. Don't ignore those needs. Develop visitation teams for all homebound and long-term care residents so that those who are the no-goes still feel valued and members of your church. Provide support for caregivers and people experiencing grief and loneliness, which is detrimental and painful. And more in our society today than ever before. Maybe because we don't have in many of our communities, the front porch idea anymore, where people sat on the front porch and people walked by and they'd say hello. Now we're inside a lot more are on the back porch of life. The future of the church? Oh, that's a good one. Today, people who are 65 and older are generally healthier, wealthier, and more active than is true of previous generations of older adults. And as a result, in multiple ways, the future of our church, of your church, of the United Methodist Church, or whatever church you are with, is in the hands of older adults because they provide the leadership. You look around the church. Who are the leaders? Who are singing on the choir? Who are committee chairs? Who are teaching in your Sunday schools? Oftentimes it's older adults. They're the ones financially supporting your church. You take all the older adults out of your church, see if you can continue to carry on. Financially. Older adults are the future of your church because they're the ones that are making the financial investment in your church. Presence. They're there. We're going to try something new. So let's gather together and do this on Sunday morning or Wednesday afternoon. Who are there? Older adults. You can count on them. They will be there. They provide the leadership. They provide the finances. They provide the presence. They also provide the service. They're in ministry. Do you know every May, during the month of May, the United Methodist Church invites every single church to hold an older adult recognition ministry event. I was just at a church last week, worked with about 30 folks, and I said, well, when was the last time you had your older adult They didn't even, and it was the United Methodist Church, a rather large church, and they didn't even know the United Methodist Church encouraged Older Adult Recognition Day. They don't say a day in May. It could be a Sunday morning worship. It could be a Wednesday night. It could be a Saturday evening dinner, whatever. The church asks that we recognize the ministries that older adults are doing in our communities. Because our older adults in our churches are actively engaged, serving on boards, volunteering in hospitals, tutoring children, engaged in so many different ways in our communities. So not everybody knows that. Younger people might not recognize the gifts that older adults are providing to the community. How do we do it? We take one day, at least one day out of the year, where we recognize the gifts, the talents, the abilities of older members, and we have Older Adult Recognition Day. So if you haven't been doing it, I hope you'll give thought. In fact, we put out a resource every year from Encore Ministry Foundation, a resource to help churches to plan for Older Adult Recognition Day. Oh, and one more, witness. The other thing that older adults are witnessing their faith. So those are the things that I believe make the future of your church what it will be through older adults. Through older adults. Ministry engagement. Now this is a picture here. This was a mentor of mine. The Reverend Dr. Albert Cole. We were together on we were both board members on the National Council on the Aging in Washington, D.C. back years ago. He was the pastor at He was the pastor at Central United Methodist Church in Kansas City back in the 60s and started the Shepherd Center model. The Shepherd Center model had 4 components. It had life maintenance needs, life enrichment needs, life reorganization needs, and life celebration needs. And started this at Central Methodist Church, United Methodist Church, and it became ecumenical. And there were shepherd centers all over the United States. Dr. Cole died a few years ago, I guess longer than that now, about a dozen years ago. But he was recognized by the United Methodist Committee on Older Adult Ministries at one of our gatherings with an award for his outstanding service to older adults through the creation of Shepherd Center. So I put his picture up there because just ministry engagement. He was the one who took it forward, ministry engagement. Yes, ma'am.
I think a factor that may be affecting older people now, ageism.
Yes. Oh, just 1 second, if I may. Only because I want everybody to be able to hear.
Okay.
Well, this won't help.
Okay, let me stand up.
Hold on. Now it's working.
Okay.
Now it's working. Now you know.
I think a factor in ageism that is affecting older people is our children. It's Generation X or Z or one of those they are now the most helicopter parents of their parents. And every time I talk with my friends, they say, I wish my children would back off. They tell me, watch that step. Don't do that. Mother, be careful. This type of thing.
Yeah.
Helicopter parenting, parents.
Yes.
And it gets on your nerves.
Yeah. 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 I hope you all heard that. But you know, and some of them are bulldozers now today. Not only helicopter, but bulldozers. That's the latest, I think, bulldozers. But part of it is for us, and I can't help that. But part of us is recognizing how we might live, modeling successful aging. But let me continue, and then we'll come back. Advocate on behalf of the needs of older adults. Identify a pressing need in your community that matches your congregational strength. The question, if your church closed today, who would miss it other than the members? Who would miss your church other than the members? If you're engaged in the community, you can identify those others who would miss your church. Connect with other churches in your area. Learn what they're doing in older adult ministry. Engage in collaborative ministry. Why ministries with older adults sometimes fail to have the right people around the table when you're planning. Have a variety of older adults. Failure to have a shared vision. Failure to have lay leadership champion older adult ministries. Failure to know the needs, abilities, and interests of older adults. And failure to recognize that no one ministry model fits all churches. You might say, well, this church has a really successful older adult ministry. Let's do it here. And it falls flat. And you say, why? Well, you may not have the strengths to be able to do that particular ministry. That church is doing it well. Maybe you can meet with them and share together instead of trying to create your own ministry. And I have stories that if I had more time to tell you all about that. That's just a way of thinking about your own church. What is God's vision for your church in older adult ministry? What would that be? And what steps would you need to take to realize that vision? What would be the steps you would need to take as a church to realize that vision? God's vision for intentional older adult ministry by within for older adults at your church is what? And what would be the steps? Selected resources. These are just a few. Again, you would have this information if you would want the yes.
I was going to take a picture of the last graph. Would you back up?
I certainly will. That one?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. These are just some resources. Richard Olson, who did Celebrating the Grain Church, of course I put on two of mine because you certainly don't want to miss those. But Richard Olson's book, Celebrating the Grain Church, is excellent. He was just one of our presenters for our monthly online, and he did it on grandparenting. Encore Ministry Foundation, who are we? Our purpose is intentional ministry, and as Action in Faith, or Faith in Action, nonprofit. We provide training, support, resources, grant funding, networking opportunities, and support for churches in the Tennessee Western Kentucky Conference. That's John's email address, Cindy's email address, and my email address if you have any questions. And all you have to do is go to encoreministry.org, and you could get this PowerPoint download if you'd like. And it could be done as a PDF. You don't have to make the whole, it could be as a PDF, which is a smaller file, or a PowerPoint if you want. I thank you. God's blessing on each of you. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Gensler. I always learn so much, and I do think that helicoptering parents is a fantastic session to talk about. I would love to. I'm afraid I'm fairly guilty of it as well. So it is time for our break. I wanted to remind you that restrooms are down this hall. There's a few more refreshments left. Our next break will actually be lunch. So when you come back, we'll have a panel presentation for you. And so we're excited to see you back in about 12 to 15 minutes.
So,
Gotcha.
Does that work?
Throw a wrench in.
Okay.
great.
Gonna offer it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we can also, I'll get that from you, because we're sending everything out. We'll probably actually mail like a toolkit out,
Okay.
and so we can include the PowerPoint information in that as well.
That'd be great. Great. Thanks, Pat.
Okay. This one I'm going to use for questions. Hello, hello, hello. He'll turn it all on, I think, when we get started.
I don't need to touch anything. I don't need to touch
think
anything.
so.
Okay, great.
But yeah.
The less I need to do, Christy.
Yeah.
Better.
The better. Yeah. Hello, hello, hello. I think he has to turn them on, but so we'll have that on you, and then when it gets to the point where we have some questions and discussion, I'll use this out there
Okay.
for people to ask their questions.
Okay, let me get my notes.
Okay. I'll go get our other people.
So, Chris,
Here, just turn it off. We'll turn it off. Yeah. Yes. I can make the introduction. Yep. No, I can do that for sure. Okay. Grab Dr. Lewis. I'd love to introduce you to John Reeves.
We saw each other in the
Oh,
mall,
did you? Oh, good.
coincidentally, yeah.
All right. And this is Reverend Dr. Rick Gitzler.
Hi, nice to meet you, Jonathan Lewis.
I think you two could have.
Do you go by Jonathan or John?
Jonathan.
Okay, great. I have a Jonathan. But he
You
goes
are a
by-
Jonathan?
Well, my son is John. I'm John.
Okay.
My son is Jonathan, but he goes by John.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I used to call him.
JJ. Yeah.
My mother used to say, if I wanted people to call him John, I would have named her John.
Yeah.
She wouldn't let people, so I don't know. Yeah,
So it's Jonathan.
It's Jonathan. Yeah. The biblical spelling, if you will.
Yeah, J-O-N.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I think if you're ever in Memphis or if you're ever in Hendersonville, wherever, the two of you could have a great meal together. Yes.
Oh,
Yes. Yep. Yep. Lots of history on both sides and things I think that would help Encore and help your ministry as well. The way we're going to set up is we'll have the chairs up there. John has this microphone, and then we've got a microphone that will pass between y'all for answers. Sure. And then when we go to the question and answer, I'll have another microphone out there. Thanks. So you got traffic trouble?
no. I was just telling Daisy, I knew where I was going, but I put it in my map this morning at about 5:30, and I thought, I need to go.
I need to get up.
It's let me get my 4-year-old out of the bed and hand her off to mom, and I need to be on the road. But thankfully, all went well.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go get Daisy ready.
I use Waze
That's what I used.
because I find that to be most dependable in avoiding,
It,
you know,
it will tell you
'Cause it's
about
human-
a major problem. Yeah.
yeah, human intelligence feeds into it. So that's my reliability
No, I
is
use that
Waze.
as well.
Yeah,
It got me here without any trouble.
good. Well,
It was not like twice as far as I thought it was, but it was a little bit. Just for some reason in my head all week long, I was thinking kind of like 2.5
Tarkov.
hours from where I
Yeah.
am, but it was more like 3.5.
Phew.
So it's a good thing I checked it.
Glad you
quite
did.
early this morning.
Yeah,
I made it at 10 o'clock. There's plenty of time. But
that's right. Good. I'm gonna get a drink, I think.
yeah.
Hi. as much as I'll ever be. So I am in the midst of a conversation with, I hope I'm not on. I introduced the idea at our last board meeting of incorporating what's called the Family Stewardship Center into what we're doing. And so I furthered that conversation this week. That's pretty exciting. And it speaks to intergenerational conversations that, you know, our target audience, of course, is older adults. But yet what you said in your presentation is the wisdom, the stories, the resources is all a part of the inheritance that's going to be passed on. It's not just about money. So how do we go about exposing and training, educating, and giving resources? You don't have to have a lot of money, but how do we give them the principles of passing on those things that really matter the most? So that's what this family stewardship is. It's about the theology of stewardship.
Yeah.
The theology of stewardship is everything that we have. Everything is going to be managed. Anyway.
If you want to go on up, I'll grab the other.
Okay, great. So, yeah. All right, Jonathan. Here we go. I'm left-handed, so I usually migrate to the left. Anywhere I'm at. Hey, Daisy. How are you? Good. I'm glad to share this time with you. Good to see you. I'm so thrilled that you're here.
All right, everyone, let's start working our way towards our seats again. All right, it's time to get back started, work our way back towards our seats. I did want to let you know, and I'll repeat this again for those who aren't seated yet, but in the middle of your table, there is a blue and gold QR code. It's standing up in a picture frame. And after this is over, we had a couple things that we didn't receive in the mail that we were bringing for today. This is what the QR code looks like. So we want to be sure that we have your address, but the QR code is there because it will take you to a link with documents. And if you would like, you can click on the top link, which is for this event, and it will have all the bios of the speakers, the agenda, some of the handouts are on there. So if you're so inclined to use it, you may. And if you want to use it, but it's not working for you, Stephanie's happy to help you. She's our guru. Afterwards, when we get back to the office next week, we will put together packages of the things that weren't here, along with some of the paper copies as well, and we'll get those out in the mail to you. So I would allow a good 2 weeks to receive it, but it'll just be some additional disaster supplies and things like that. But we'll throw in a copy of the PowerPoints and all that good stuff for you. So in the meantime, you'll have access through your computer, and we'll send out the links in an email as well, if that's easier. But I just wanted to let you know what that was for. And it reminded me because I needed to introduce our congregational panel, and their bios are listed on here for the most part. First, I wanted to thank John Rivas, the Executive Director of the Encore Ministry Foundation. He's going to moderate for us today, so he's going to ask some of the questions. And we're just going to go around and talk a little bit, and then there'll be a time at the end where we can have some discussion amongst you all, and either about the particular ministry that these folks have or something different if you like. Just their experience is really overwhelming, the amount of work that our individuals here have put in over the years to serve congregations. So the Reverend Dr. Jonathan Lewis is an ordained deacon in the United Methodist Church and a board-certified chaplain. He holds a bachelor's degree in religion from the University of Georgia and a master's of divinity degree from Duke University and a doctorate in pastoral counseling from Memphis Theological Seminary. He's currently working as the Director of Community Partnerships, leading the Congregational Health Network and Chronic Disease Self-Management Programs at Methodist Le Bonheur Healthcare. Let's see. Lost my place. He teaches in the religious studies at Rhodes College and directs a certificate program at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center called Serving the Underserved. So thank you, Dr. Lewis, for being here. Daisy Wilson is to his left, or your right. Daisy's to the right. She serves as the diversity coordinator for the Alzheimer's Association. And that may not seem related to congregational care, but our work at the university actually funds this position for Daisy. Daisy has worked statewide over the past 2 years, working individually with congregations, helping support ministries that have to do with health, especially around brain disease, and supporting people with dementia and their caregivers. So I looked the other day, and it's a number of churches. Do you have a number in your head of how many? In just the past 3 months, it's been at least 19 churches that she's been involved with. So when you think about that over a 2-year period, it's a lot, and we're just very grateful for her service. And she hails from Memphis. She lives in Memphis. That's her home base. And then we have Miss Pat Brandenstein, our special friend who comes from Winchester, who drove from Winchester, Tennessee to be here today. She has a fabulous ministry called Wings of Hope that's been her call to service for many years now. We're excited to hear about that as well. She's been a long standing person who has served the church well for many years. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John and let you get started.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Am I on? Can you hear me?
You're on, but maybe put your microphone a little closer. There you go.
Hello.
All right. Can you
Is that
hear me in
good?
the back?
Are we good? Are we good? All right. Very good. Well, I will speak up. How's that? It's good to have our esteemed guests and panelists here. And Pat, you know, I'd like to begin with you. One of the things that Rick mentioned in his presentation is purpose. And purpose is so very, very important as a driver in our lives. And I would like for you to share with us the why of Wings of Hope. Maybe the vision, the mission, what is in your heart that caused the fruition and the formation of Wings of Hope?
Well, I'm going to start out with God. That's a good place to get started. And God gave me the mission and the vision for Wings of Hope. And that's why I say I'm co-founder of Wings of Hope. That the other founder is God. And all of this came about on September 30th, 1993, which was over 30 years ago. So it's been a while. And with any ministry, it has to build. But to give you an idea of how it started, was that I was a school nurse in a junior high, and my phone rang at 2:30 in the afternoon, which was probably one of the busiest times for a school nurse. You've got kids getting on buses, falling as they go up the steps, knocking out teeth. You got football practice going on out on the field, and they're yelling for you to come there. And so it's one of the busiest times at 2:30 in the afternoon. But along with that, my phone rang. So I pick it up, clinic, Pat Brandenstein, and on the other line, the voice says, "This is the DeSoto Police Department." Within seconds, my mind went, oh no, our daughter had just gotten her driver's license, and it was her first day in high school to be driving home. So you know how your mind goes so fast and everything. So there I was, but in the next sentence, the policeman says to me, "Sue Havman wants you to come and be with her. She has just come home and found her husband dead on the floor." Now, by that conversation, you would think that I knew Sue Havman well. I barely knew her. This is all God. Listen to this story. I even had to say to the DeSoto policeman, "How do I get to her house? What's her address? You know, I need to know how to get there." So I went to the principal of the school, explained to him what had happened, and he said, "Go, Pat, don't worry, just go, we'll handle it, give me the keys." So I handed over the keys. I followed the directions that the DeSoto policeman gave me, got there, vehicles all over the place, ambulance, police cars, firemen, all of these people. I walk into the house, and here's a group of men standing over here, and here's Sue by herself. All I could do, and by the way, as I was driving over there, Lord, I have never been in this position before. I barely know this lady. We happened to be in a Bible study together, and that was the only way I knew her name even. So I went over to her and just held her as she sobbed. And a verse kept coming to my mind, "I'll never leave you nor forsake you. I'll never leave you nor forsake you." And I kept whispering that into her ear. Out of that whole experience, my children were in high school. My husband was in Kansas developing a business. And out of the whole experience, I kept looking, where is the church? Where is the church? There was the casserole brigade, we might call it, that lasted. How many widows do we have in this room? Raise your hand if you're a widow. Okay, we have a few, so when I say the casserole brigade, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, the church brings in all these casseroles the first month, and then wham, you're dropped. Friendships change. Everything changes in your life. I sort of partnered with Sue for 3 years. My husband was gone. My kids, we were trying to teach independence. They were going off to college. And I just observed. If there's any pastors in this room, if I can make one suggestion to you, after you do the service for the husband that's passed away, call that widow in 2 weeks, or take your wife and go over and visit with her. I never did meet Sue's pastor. And this was a large, cohesive, though, church. And her husband had just graduated from Dallas Theological Seminary. And so people knew of John Havman in that church just due to the fact he was in seminary. But Sue saw very few people after that month. She did continue to go to church, and she would say, "They're afraid of me." I see people going, "Yeah, they're afraid of me. I've changed a role." They run from me. And let me say, don't run from a recent widow. Just go up and give her a big hug. And all you got to say in her ear when you're hugging her is, "I'm praying for you." You don't have to say a bunch of words. In fact, your presence there means more than anything. So out of that whole episode and the 3 years that I sort of followed her pathway, we had to move. I didn't have a job for a year, so I saturated myself with scripture or theologians, one being John MacArthur. Pastors, look him up. He has an entire series on pastoring with the widowed. I highly recommend him. He even has a little book that you can do in a Bible study. And out of that year, I got the courage, I guess. You know, we got to take risks with the Lord. I got the courage to develop a chapter for widows. And I was living in Ashland City at the time. God had blessed us with a huge house right on Main Street. We were renting, by the way. We didn't own the house. It was owned by Randy Travis. So that tells you a little something. But we rented from him. We had a huge backyard. And I just started inviting widows over for dinner. And we would have a great big spread in the backyard. Ruth Leviner, who was a pastor's wife 3 times, and she said, "I now have the saying, 'Pastor, stay away from me. It seems like you die when I marry you.'" But Ruth was a great support for me. And out of that, Wings of Hope was birthed. And it came from Isaiah 40:31. "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will mount up with wings of eagles. They will run and not be weary. They will walk and not become tired." Wings of hope, Isaiah 40:31. Now, this is not me. Again, I have to say all the glory belongs to God. But it took some listening. And that year he gave me to listen to him and hear what he had to say through his word, through other people, and through the experience of being with Sue. So Wings of Hope was birthed in Ashland City, of pulling the widows together in the town, interdenominational. And when I say widow, through my studies, now this is going to probably blow some of your minds. But John MacArthur says, this is biblical when I say this, that a widow is any woman that's lost the protection and provision of her husband. That would include death, divorce, desertion, and imprisonment. So when we minister, that's who we minister to. And I'll tell you, lately, too, we're looking at single moms because unfortunately, they have lost that protection and provision. So that's how Wings of Hope was birthed. And I better be quiet because I'll be taking up the whole hour here.
Thank you, Pat.
But to give you an idea, WINGS stands for Widows in Need Giving Service. The widow is needy at first. Those first couple years are rather difficult adjustment. Two things, loneliness, which we've already talked about, and then, am I going to have enough money to live? Those are two of the biggies, but there's a lot of other ones there too. Okay, I'll give up the microphone, John. I'm sorry, you gave me the mic first, so here goes. I hope you come back to me because there's more to be said.
Thank you, Pat. Daisy, let's go to you next. What I'd like to ask you, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us a little bit more about your role and how you've been able to engage churches and how, as they minister to older adults, how do you partner with them to do that?
Okay, so my role, as Dr. Wick said, I'm the diversity coordinator for the Alzheimer's Association. Through the Alzheimer's Association, in partnership with engaging communities, I really say I got the best of both worlds, because before coming to the association 2 years ago, I worked in long-term care for 10 years, so I worked with those persons living with the disease. And so that's my professional passion. And then I am a church girl to the T. I grew up in church. I love it. So it was like bringing my professional passion and one of my personal passions together and just being able to bring them both. So I know that when we talk about God being in the mix, can y'all hear me? I'm sorry. Yeah. When we talk about God being in the midst of situations, I know that this was a God thing, because I couldn't have thought of a better, I couldn't have thought of a better, I couldn't have thought of a better opportunity in doing so. And so in my role, whereas the Alzheimer's Association is a national nonprofit, and we serve everyone. However, I have the honor of working closely with the faith-based communities, the underserved, and those rural areas. So that's kind of how my position works. And so being able to go into the churches and do educational programs on the disease. Most of the congregations are older. As Dr. Rick talked about when he was up here, the world is aging at one place, but those people who are going to show up at church every Sunday are the older congregants. I am a millennial, and I go every Sunday, but I have some friends that's like, I'm going to tune in on live. And so as far as being faithful and still going to the church and actually being active within the church and providing their funds and helping with the church is the older population in that. And then the church is one thing that I help them in regards to like creating those programs, giving them those ideas. Because sometimes a church may have the idea but kind of need guidance sometimes, or knowing what's best to do in this situation. And so helping them in kind of creating those programs there. And Miss Pat, I'm like you, I'll get to talking. So I did bring my paper to help me stay on track, because I'm like her, I'll get to telling stories. But creating and developing those programs, and then creating dementia-friendly services in particular for their members who are affected by the disease, as well as their caregivers. Dr. Rick talked about those familiar hymns being very, very important, very helpful when you have a person with dementia. Sittings are easier to implement than others, so hymns and songs. Some of the churches that I've worked with before dedicate like a fifth Sunday to dementia services in their church. And fifth Sundays come typically like, maybe once every quarter. So that fifth Sunday service is completely dementia friendly. So there's still a service, there's still a word, but the message may be 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. The songs are more of the familiar hymns. So just implementing those things throughout their services, and then educating their congregation on the disease. Many times, once I go to a church and we have the session, I always hear people say, I wish I would have known that information before. It also helps because if you're not familiar with the disease and you are the pastor and you're giving the word, and someone gets up and starts wondering, and you're not familiar with the disease, so to you, this could be a distraction through the word. If the congregation is not familiar with, this is a symptom of this disease, and now that we know Miss Patsy has this disease, we can, that's just an example name. I'm not saying anyone in particular, but this person has this disease, and so now that we see her up wondering, it's not a distraction because we're all aware. So even helping churches kind of create teams or staff within the church who's familiar, who's a little bit more trained, so that as a person does get up and wander or have a dementia behavior, there's now a team that can come in and take that person to a quieted area or someone that knows how to still engage that person who's having it, and then the caregiver can still attend the service. So those are just some of the ways that I partner in with the churches and kind of help on that.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thanks. Dr. Lewis, the Congregational Health Network, how has your work ministered to congregations over the past?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this actually, that the Congregational Health Network started with a phone call from Randy Travis, as a matter. I'm kidding, that's not true. It's not true at all. I got so jealous that Randy Travis was a part of your story. I wanted to have him in mind. If I think about it hard enough, actually, this is true. What I'm about to say is true. Congregational Health Network did start at Methodist Lebanon Healthcare in Memphis, and really specifically at Methodist South Hospital, which is in the south part of Memphis, and truly is only about a mile from Graceland. So if I really work on this, I might be able to make some sort of connection to Elvis.
He drove by one day.
Yeah, that's right, and the CHN. Methodist South Hospital is very special to me. That's really where I got started as a chaplain with Methodist. My wife works at Methodist South. We met there, actually, at that hospital. And she's there as we speak as an occupational therapist. And that is really, Methodist South Hospital is the smallest of the hospitals in our system around Memphis. It is a community hospital that got founded a little over 50 years ago. And the idea really came from trying to find ways that the hospital could reach the community outside of the walls. Obviously, we do so much for people when they come to us as patients, but in seeking solutions for people, how do we get resources, how do we get education, how do we get interventions to people that will reach them before they come to the hospital, maybe even prevent them from coming to the hospital at all. One of the things that really made sense was to partner with congregations and pastors to see how we could create programs to reach the community in that way. And so that was 2007 was really the first year for the Congregational Health Network, almost 20 years ago. And since that time, the CHN has really been a lot of different things, actually. It's not just one model of education or of intervention. It's not only aimed at one particular disease state or health need. Really, even over the course of that almost 20 years, CHN has been sort of a quite large program. It has been sort of a leaner, meaner program. It has been mostly corporate funded. It has been mostly grant funded. The CHN has been very resilient in that way. And I won't go too far into the detail of that for the moment. I'd love to talk more about kind of the different modes of existence that the CHN has seen. But that's been actually one of the most rewarding things about it is how sort of versatile and diverse it has been over the life of its service in the community. So that's actually one of the things I really like about it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Now, Pat, it's back to you, okay? So now do I have to put boundaries on this, okay? You do. It was a wonderful thing to hear about how Wings of Hope was born and how that was just an incredible story. What ignites you today to continue on?
Well, I think first of all, the Lord ignites me. It has been a passion in my life now for 30 years. If you recall, I said in 1993, this was the beginning of it. And we now have 4 chapters of Wings of Hope, the first being in Ashland City. The next one was in Franklin County, Tennessee. The next one is in Rutherford County, Tennessee. And now we have one in Kent County, Michigan. So if we got anybody here from Michigan, you can go to Kent County and find a Wings of Hope chapter. I know it's a sad subject to talk about, the loss of a spouse. And I'll just share with you, for 30 years, my husband was alive. He passed away 5 months ago. So, but I know where he is. That's our hope in the Lord. I know where he is. And I guess I'm just more and more passionate now that he's gone. I hope I can phrase this right. And this is for all the widows out there and for anybody that has gone through some tragedy in your life. Rick Warren, everybody knows Rick Warren, right? The Purpose-Driven Life. You know, I was listening to him the other day, and he made a statement that I thought all of us will benefit from, not only widows, but everybody. And I'm probably paraphrasing it here, but he said this: the most tragic situation that you might be going through will turn out to be your biggest ministry to others. The most tragic situation that you have ever been through might turn out to be your biggest ministry. And yes, I did have this head knowledge. You know, for 30 years I've been working with widows, but now it's the heart knowledge and how good the Lord is. And that's why I want to keep Wings of Hope going. And I want to include all of you. I want to include churches in Wings of Hope. The emblem for Wings of Hope is the eagle, as you might guess, from Isaiah 40:31. And we take the eagle because it has 2 wings, and we have 2 wings to Wings of Hope. We have the chapters where widows come together, and I'm talking about widows through death, divorce, desertion, or imprisonment. I've dealt with all 4 of those categories. They meet once a month. They have an organized meeting, and they always have a meal. I'll tell you this, the best way you can minister to a widow is ask her out to eat or have her over to your house to eat, because we really don't eat. We graze. I see people going, yeah, we graze. We don't fix big meals. And probably Dr. Wick can address that better. But I find myself, it's not fun cooking for one person, doing a big roast and everything. But anyway, we meet once a month, and we always have some type of program. One of our best programs was we had an orthopedic doctor come and talk. And those ladies kept him for 2 hours. And I was worried about, you know, he's got to get on to his practice. But we have a program every month. And what I would say is I'm here to help you get a chapter started if you would like to get a chapter started in your community. But second of all are the churches, like I said. How many people have a widowed person's ministry within your church? Raise your hand. I don't see a one hand here. a widowed person's ministry. What's the biggest stressor in a person's life? Death of a spouse, divorce of a spouse. The two biggest stressors. Where's our church? Are we supposed to be there and help that person through that crisis that they're going through? Yes, we are. God commands us to do that. And one of the things that Wings of Hope does is we go to churches, and I know you've heard this from Rick, but you have to be intentional and organized. And yeah, you can have a widow's ministry by having a great big Christmas party for all the widowed, but there's more to that. Widowed persons are affected in 7 different ways. I hope I can remember them. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritually, sociological, financial, and environmentally. Now you say, environmentally? How in the world is she affected environmentally? Well, every Friday I gotta haul this great big trash can out that the city's given me. I gotta haul it out to the street. And I find sometimes I'll hit something in the driveway and I get a little tipsy over to the side with this huge thing. So there's just little ways that if the church will just sit down and have an organized, intentional ministry for the widowed, and here I'm including men, you notice. Now, if any man in this group wants to start a chapter, I say this every time I talk. If any man wants to start a chapter, I can give you a notebook, how to start, what to do, how to do it, how to go about it. Same way with churches. We come to churches, we do not require any amount of money, but we do accept love offerings. And that's the way the Lord has provided for the 30 years. We have never been zero balance. The Lord is good. And we would love to come to your church, or we would like to talk to you in regards to maybe starting a chapter. Now, I will not see this vision, I'm sure, but I'm projecting out there, and this probably sounds a little bit crazy, but I'm thinking every church needs a widowed person's ministry. Every widow needs a widow's chapter to go to, because a lot goes on during those chapter meetings. You'll have maybe a widow of 7 years and a widow of maybe 5 months, like myself. I can learn from her experience, and what a place to be about like-minded people being together. And so I have a trifold out in the hallway there. If you'd like to talk to me more about it, I would be more than happy to talk with you over the lunchtime or whatever. But I guess the Lord has given me a passion and a purpose, and it's been a passion for 30 years now. So I'm here for you, whatever you would like.
Thank you, Pat. Daisy, let me ask you now. As you serve congregations, and 19 in the past, 3 months? My goodness. Do you see ways in which congregation members, like all of us, how do they use the gifts that God has given us, the spiritual gifts that God has given us, to support each other during times of extended illness and time? My dad's journey was 10 years. So how do we do that? How can we do that?
Well, one thing that I don't think any of us I've never heard anyone say I got too much of this, is prayer. Like Ms. Pat said, you go up to someone and just say, hey, I'm praying for you. Now, when you say you're praying for them, now you're committing to actually having the conversation with God. So make sure you remember to do the praying portion, but praying for one another. It's such a simple task. When you get up, you start your day, you pray. There's some mornings that God brings people to my mind, and I just say, add them in my prayer in the end. So praying for one another is probably the number one thing that I would say, because God can do far more than we can. Then the gift of giving, and this can be financially. However, meals, especially for like a caregiver caring for a loved one with an illness, providing meals for them, that takes a load off of a person's plate. So providing those meals or helping with transportation, if their loved one has a doctor's appointment or the person with the illness has a doctor's appointment, maybe assisting them to their appointments as much as possible. So just giving of your time. And then also I would say the gift of encouragement, visiting a person, calling them, hey, I'm just checking on you, just making sure that you're okay, sending them cards. These are things that you can even do within your widow's ministry, is y'all could do the cards. I know back at my home church where I grew up in, there was on the program, there would be a list of the sick and shutting in. So maybe taking time and doing something particular for those persons. So encouragement, prayer, and giving doesn't have to be financial, just time, going by and visiting a person, helping with those meals and transportation. Those things really, really would go a long way. Now, I could go deeper in a list, but I'm trying to do right today. So
Thanks, Dave.
those are definitely some things that could.
Well, that's wonderful. Dr. Lewis, over the years, how have congregations responded to the Congregational Health Network?
Really positively. As I said, CHN is almost 20 years old. In that time, we have had nearly 700 congregations in the Memphis area that have had a covenant relationship with us, with the hospital system, at one time or another, which is a tremendous number. That number of churches is not currently active today. It would, in fact, be impossible for us to work with 700 congregations at once. But over the life of the program, but over nearly 2 decades, that is the number we have worked with. And I think that's because, to answer your question, how congregations have responded, one of the ways they've responded is congregations have raised their hand, have reached out for partnership, have come with an idea when there was a need. And so it might have been seasonal, right? Just because someone at a church is trying to start a health ministry or wants to do a walking club or wants to have an Alzheimer's class, right? That doesn't mean that they have to start a program that's going to last for 100 years. That might seem sort of overwhelming or stressful, and I think it's important to say that sometimes programs around health needs or any sort of other kind of support program might be just for the season that it's in. A perfect example of that is the pandemic. When we were all dealing with that in the ways that we did, especially when the vaccine started to become available, churches in our area really wanted to have vaccine clinics in their fellowship halls, in their gyms, in their parking lots, any way they could do it. And they wanted to make those available not only to their own members and families, of course, but also to their neighborhoods. And so really the thing that the Congregational Health Network worked on almost exclusively for the better part of the year, especially in 2022, I guess it was to provide the resources of the hospital system to partner with churches to run these vaccine clinics. And we did that just sort of over and over and over again throughout our community in a way that helped people in sort of a temporary season, right? We're not doing COVID vaccine clinics anymore. We did that in the season when that's what the community needed, when that's what churches were telling us they were looking for. And so that's one thing that occurs to me as an answer to the question, how have churches responded? It occurs to me that churches have responded when they've needed it. And that's been, one of the ways that the CHN has functioned in the community.
Great, great. So Pat, I know that you answered this at the tail end of your last segment, and deeply. But is there anything else briefly that you'd like to add as you see to the future of Wings of Hope?
I guess I would say people would maybe become more insightful into what widows are going through. You know, I mentioned the 7 areas, and usually a widow goes through those 7 areas that I mentioned to you. Again, I'll mention them. I see people with pen and paper going. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. I just lost the other.
Environmental.
That's something that happens.
Sociological.
Sociological. Help me out, guys.
Environmental. Yeah.
And just to give you a little bit of personal insight, the reason why I have this computer here is to help me out. I used to just spiel this out, you know, but a widow's mind gets foggy. Like I have to be very careful when I'm
Listen,
doing
you don't
my
have to be a widow to have a foggy mind. I just want you to know that. That's not a precursor to that. My wife will attest that you don't need to be a widow to do that.
But that's one of the things that I don't think people realize, that we're in a fog for about a year. And we might recognize your face, but we cannot bring up your name. And like I said, when I'm doing my checkbook, I have to be very cautious. I used to be good in math, and now I got to make sure I got that calculator there, and I'm double checking. So those are the first things, is our minds are different. And if you'll keep that an insight, and it's just due to the stress. Myself, I had hospice. I am a retired nurse, so I knew what was going on. But it's a lot of stress. And, you know, it's women too. Dr. Gallant, if I'm recalling the name right, says that us as women, men, listen to this clearly, okay? Us as women suffer stress 30% more than you men do. So if you see your wife sort of going, you know, just keep in mind she's 30% more stressed than you are. And so there's just those little things that I would say, if you have a neighbor that's a widow, go see her. Take your children, because she's very lonely too. That's another. Loneliness and financial are the top 2 areas, along with all those other areas, the practical areas of what I call them the blue and the pink jobs. All of a sudden, we're doing the blue jobs along with the pink jobs. The pink jobs, you know, us women do. We cook, we do all those things. But then the blue jobs are, okay, my transmission went out in my car. What do I do? And I go into a lot of this when I do presentations and everything.
Thank you.
But you just, I'll say to you, the Lord has been so good since Dick passed away.
Amen.
I can see him working in everything. And one of the first things that happened the day after he passed away, would you believe I had a water leak in the cement foundation of my house? I went for 2 months without hot water. But thank goodness I could praise the Lord, because the plumber put in a valve for me so that when I did need a shower, I could just turn this little valve on, run back, take my shower, run back to the hot water heater, and turn the valve off. So what I would say, if there's any recent widows here, go to Isaiah 54:5. Isaiah 54:5. God becomes your husband when you've lost your husband. Rely upon him steadily, and he will provide everything for you.
Thank you, Pat. Now, Daisy, let's go to you next. Just one class. What are three things? What are the top three things you'd like church leaders to know about ministering to older adults and caregivers?
So being sure to build trust with them. That's one of the things I learned with working with churches. And, I thought because I grew up in church, it's like, oh, I know this is going to be a cakewalk. No, it's not. You have to build trust and build those relationships. So as leaders serving older adults, building that trust, being intentional, being one of the ways to do that. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Checking in on them, serving your seniors, truly reaching out to them and making sure that their needs are being met. The second thing would be including them. As we are going into a new age of things, a lot of times, we try to leave our seniors behind, or we got new ideas and new things, and that's great. Those fresh ideas are really good, but still making sure that we're including our seniors, like Dr. Rick said, bringing the older and the younger together. I know for me, I grew up, everybody says I have an old soul. I grew up watching my grandmother. I would follow her. When my cousins want to go play outside, I want to be in the kitchen with grandma, watching everything that she does. So there is so much wisdom that we as the younger generation can gain from that. So bringing the two together in some different activities in that, making sure that our seniors still feel needed and considered within the church, because the reality is most of it is the foundation that they've built upon. So you want to make sure they still feel included in that. And then my third thing would be for the caregiver, make sure that you check on the caregiver. So many times when you're a caregiver, you're so used to people asking how your loved one is that you're caring for. Sometimes the caregiver wants somebody to say, well, how are you doing? So as leaders caring for older adults and caregivers, asking the caregiver, but I understand how your mom is, how your dad is. How are you feeling? And what can I do to help you in the situation? And prove that you're listening to them when they're speaking by following up with the action. If they say, I'm really tired, and sometimes caregivers have a hard time of really accepting help, but you still act upon the help, still provide the help, because it's easier when you actually show up with the meal. You may have said it, and I said, no, we don't need that, but then you show up with the food. Now, I'm not going to close the door in your face and say, I don't want that food. Come on in. Bring the meal. So following up with the action of what the person is saying or not saying. Sometimes just what you notice that they may need and they may not ever ask for, as the leaders kind of taking that initiative and following up with them on that. Those would probably be my top three. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Dr. Liz, one last question for you. We have congregational leaders here, and given your experience ministering to congregations over the years, what advice do you have for them if they're interested in starting a health program in their church?
Yeah, I would probably on this emphasize what's sometimes called the 3 Ps: prayers, people, and partnerships. Prayers, people, and partnerships. First of all, as many others have said today and just on this stage right now, start with prayer. See where the Spirit directs you and what might be possible at your church in terms of a health ministry or something else. And the second there is people. Your greatest asset in your congregation is your people. And so you really want to find who are those champions? Who are those people in your congregation that maybe are hearing something similar to what you're hearing when they are praying about a health ministry or about a need in the community? Maybe they have another P, maybe they have a similar passion to you. Or to some other small group of people in the congregation that really want to start something around a certain need, around widows, around Alzheimer's, whatever the need may be. Start with the people and where it is that they have energy and passion and maybe even a calling, and see what can form from that. And then the third is partnerships. You as a congregational leader, as a member in a church, as somebody with a vision and a passion and a calling, you don't have to do it alone. The church doesn't have to come up with absolutely all the needed resources and structures to serve their community. They can partner with a hospital system. They can partner with a nonprofit. They can partner with other churches. So much of what we do in the CHN is making connections in the communities where people can help each other. And so I would summarize advice for someone maybe thinking about starting something in their church with those 3 Ps: prayers, people, and partnerships.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I didn't want to just, we've got about 6 minutes left, but I'm going to take 1 minute of it, so we'll have 5. How's that?
We've got plenty of time.
Okay. I just want, for those of you who may not know, Encore Ministry Foundations would offer a grant to help support a program starting up that's intentional, that is targeted, that would be available to partner with church. That's what we do, is we want to help support older adult programs in specific areas that you have a passion for as local congregations. That is part of the reason we exist, is to come along and partner with you to see that come to fruition. So that being said, there may be a question or two that you might have. So we have about 5 minutes left for the segment. Is there anyone here who would have a question for any of these awesome panelists?
See if I can get this microphone to work.
You can have mine.
I'll
I'll
take
be
yours.
glad to give it.
I'll take yours. All right. We just want to make sure everyone that's listening online can hear the questions.
My question to all of you is that in your work that you do you find that there's a time of the year that there is a greater need? And I'm wondering if it's the holiday season that might be starting right now and go through to the first of the year when there's a greater need to serve older adults in your communities.
Go ahead. Either way.
I was actually thinking, for our work in particular, Congregational Health Network, right now actually is a very busy time. I wonder if something related to, I mean, I'm thinking about Pat's work might have a steeper need around the holidays. Maybe, I could imagine that for sure, and Pat could speak to that. For us, it's kind of the opposite, because a lot of things we're doing with congregations are, very much in addition to their regular sort of activities. And starting sometime in November, us calling a pastor or a church liaison about doing a health fairs, they might not pick up. Right now, there is a lot of that. In the fall, starting especially with back to school, a lot of churches are doing programs where they're trying to get people in the building. They're trying to draw from the neighborhoods around them. Because of the weather, it's a nice time of year to do things outside and on the church grounds. This actually is a busy season for us when there's just a lot of energy around sort of doing events at the church. It might be different for others.
Yes, this time of year is difficult, starting from Thanksgiving, because we don't even have Thanksgiving anymore. It seems like we just jump right into Christmas. But starting from Thanksgiving till probably after February. And the holidays in there, you've got families gathering together. Us women, speaking from a widow's standpoint, we have the joy of cooking. We don't want to cook anymore. I see somebody, yeah, you're like me, we don't want to cook anymore. In fact, I feel like I've lost my skills of cooking because I haven't cooked for 5 months. But yes, it's extremely difficult because everybody is in a holiday mood. And for 2 years, if not longer, you have that loss that the two of you were joined together at that altar and became one. And all of of a sudden that one is broken. It hurts. Yeah, and you don't have that sharing. You don't have that, what are we going to buy the kids for Christmas? You got, and all this holiday hoopla and everything. And the best thing that I would say to a recent widow is, if you're invited to a party, and if you don't feel like going, just say, I'm sorry, I can't go, I have another engagement. And just write engagement on your calendar. That way you've got another engagement. Also, if you do go, drive yourself. Don't let somebody pick you up. The reason for that is, let's say you're 15 minutes into the Christmas party, and all of a sudden you have a moment where the tears start coming. That's called ambush, by the way. You're ambushed by your emotions. They just happen, and you have no reason why they're happening, but you're ambushed by them, and you need to get out. And so that's why you drive yourself to the parties there at the beginning. People think that maybe you're being antisocial, but you're not. It's for your own personal wellness that you make these decisions. Yes, it's extremely hard, and Valentine's Day also.
And January and February are just very depressing months.
Right, right. That's
After
why I
Christmas,
said,
everybody's.
yeah, that's why I said from Thanksgiving to through February, are exceptionally rough. But you might, just go to a widow's house at Christmas time and take her a pie and say, let's have a cup of coffee together.
Any other questions or comments? Some of you may be wondering, you've heard the ideas, but wondering a little bit how to put them to work. So we'll talk about that in a second.
Hi, I appreciate the comments you shared about being available to people, because that is so important. I don't know if this is an issue with churches today, but it definitely is within our community and businesses. But with the automated telephone systems today, people call and no one is there. And there should always be someone there, someone they could contact immediately, because when they need assistance, they need it now. And to have to wait or to go through many, many people is so difficult, making it even more difficult for them. So any way that we can assist in that manner, not just with the churches, but within the community and any group, is having the availability.
Have you all seen, Daisy, have you seen a model where churches have worked out a way to be as responsive as possible to needs? Or personally?
So within their own congregations, for sure, giving their congregants, most of the time, now mega churches are a little different because it just makes it it's a whole grander scale. But I know in the smaller churches, definitely to where everybody has the pastor's phone number. You can call, your pastor when something's going on. But then in particular with resources, I definitely understand that on business days, they're not open. I know one thing for the association for sure, we do have a helpline that is 24/7, 365. If you're ever having an issue, an Alzheimer's or dementia related issue, of course, and I know they limit it because we don't get to answer the phone for every issue or help in every issue. But as far as the Alzheimer's Association, and one of the good things with our resources with the churches is that we gave out our number. And so if they can't reach their pastor and it's an Alzheimer's or dementia thing and they can't reach me, because sometimes I'm working on sometimes I'm not the quickest at getting to the phone either, but we do have our 800 number that is 24/7, 365. I'll give it, I'm sorry, 800, I see people trying to write, 800-272-3900. And it's 24/7, 365. It's master's level clinicians. They're always available, even if Daisy or another local contact is not, as far as the Alzheimer's Association goes. But I definitely understand the frustration on, if I called on Saturday and I don't get a call back until Monday, or later if it's the holiday season, that definitely being a frustrating thing. So that's one of the things that we have in place that kind of helps with someone being available to help, even if it's not your local contact with that.
Any other questions?
Daisy, specifically for you, first off, I noticed how young you are. That makes a difference, and I really appreciate everything you've done and you are doing. My question to you is, in the congregations, when they find that someone has dementia or Alzheimer's or a mixture, whichever the case may be, it is similar to when they find out a child has autism. And there's always that, I have no clue what I'm supposed to do. Is there specifically something simple that is made out by y'all, whatever, that will help the congregations be able to recognize and move forward to help out these people?
Yes, ma'am. So we do have one of the most common programs that typically, especially when I first start with the church, is the understanding the disease, because that's the biggest thing. Until you know what disease is going on, then you better know how to address it. So we do have a program, an educational program that's titled Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia, to where either a person could physically come out, like myself, and do the session with the church. But then we also have these educational programs available online. And our website is alz.org, and it's completely free. So you go through kind of yourself on the time-paced, kind of through your computer at your own rate, at your own speed. But you go through that program, and it does kind of teach more about the disease. Also, warning signs. That's another one of the earlier ones. We kind of talk about those things that you look for in a person with dementia, or if you're thinking a person has it, so those 10 earlier warning signs there. But that is available, alz.org, or having someone come out to your church. Like myself, I do cover the state. So if your church wanted to have a session on that, I can definitely come out and help with that also. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's important to think about, too, Encore also has resources for ministry and for working through ministering to people with dementia and their caregivers as well, as do we. Part of our grant has sponsored toolkits and things like that that we have available, but also trying to help connect you with some of those resources. So if you leave here and you lose your paperwork and you know, you can always contact us and we can help bridge you to the people that are local in your community that have some of that. You'll hear from Alzheimer's Tennessee, which is a different organization, later this afternoon. Same thing. They've got some hotlines and resources and things like that. So that's part of the whole objective of our whole grant, is helping churches get hooked up with the resources that are local to you. And so that's why I just appreciate all of these people being here to help show those examples as well. Any other questions or comments?
John, listen to everybody you have up there on the panel. They've done a fantastic job bringing us the message about caring for our older adults. But there's one other course that's available. It's called Congregational Care Minister. That goes along with everything that's been said here today, and churches are being encouraged to form congregational care teams. So if no one has taken that course, you need to really consider it. It is outstanding. It was breathtaking to me because I lost my wife about a year and a half ago. And it gets into death and serving the family. So you have to have a willingness to serve God in this area. you have to have the strength to serve God in this area. And I think we have a fantastic team here with Encore Ministry, and we can just look at our future and keep going forward and increase our ministry for our older adults. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks so much. Dr. Lewis, this makes me think about, first of all, you always have to think about the size of the church. Like, there are small churches that need different things, but then you have your large churches and the partnering and the networking. But one thing I think is important for all of us to recognize is just the burden that pastors have, and helping serve the pastor as well. And I wondered if you could offer a word of encouragement to those who serve, and maybe feel a little overwhelmed by trying to go back and institute some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's a really good reminder, and it's one of the reasons why when I was talking about the 3 Ps, I am so insistent on finding the people who can help you and seeking out partnerships that can help in whatever it is that you're needing or trying to do, because pastors in particular will often be the type to try and take it all upon themselves, and to get overwhelmed, even while maybe appearing to others like they've got it all together, and they often don't. From the perspective of our model, from the Congregational Health Network, the sort of the designation we have for the point person in the church who corresponds most directly with us at the hospital system, they're called a liaison. It's called the church liaison for the member congregation. And every now and then, the liaison for a church will be the pastor, but we kind of prefer for it not to be, for the reason that you're saying. We really would prefer for a member church who's trying to start a health ministry or do a program with us, whatever the case may be. We really prefer for them to find that church champion, or even better, a group of kind of church champions that can be that support person. You want the pastor's support. You want the pastor to be that encourager and to be that spokesperson in the way that they are usually very gifted at being. But when it comes to the to the real nuts and bolts of a program, you really want to have that group of people that is there to sort of take on the workload so that the pastor doesn't feel like they have to. So that one of the many reasons why finding the people and finding the partnerships is so important to having an actual sustainable program, because if it all falls on the pastor, or really if it all falls on any sort of one person, it's going to be overwhelming. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Just to confirm, with working with congregations, when I had my ones to where the pastor is the contact, we may talk in June, and then I might not hear from them again until June of the following year, and it kind of starts the cycle. It's like, okay, so versus someone else in the church being the person over that particular program because they're focusing on that one thing, whereas, like I said, the pastor already has so much on his plate, and a lot of times they're interested, but they need the person to say, hey, I don't mind being the one to do this program within. So that's definitely one of the things you see is like, it's great, they're excited, and then I'm calling, and we're kind of getting partial emails back and forth until another longer period of time. So definitely, like you said, appointing a person to it definitely helps get the ball rolling a lot sooner.
And I'm going to ask John to close us out and bless our lunch. I just wanted to reiterate a reminder that Dr. Gensler and Encore Ministry Foundation have been doing this work for a very long time. They've built out lots of tools. So if you're saying, okay, well, I don't want to put this on the pastor, but I'm not really sure. We have a team of people, or it's just me. There are needs assessments that can be done. There's a process that's in place, as he mentioned in his presentation, but he also has that in his books, and they're online as resources as well. So again, don't leave feeling overwhelmed. Know that there are those resources out there. If you say, well, I'm not real sure the exact thing my church should take on, there are resources to help you figure that out.
Thank you, Christy.
Yes.
Let's give these guys a hand. Appreciate all 3 of you. Thank you for being such a great part of this. Let's pray together. We're grateful, God, for these moments together. We're grateful for the work and the coordination that has happened and that is continuing to happen to put this day to your will and to your glory. Now, as we eat together, I pray that you would bless this food to further your kingdom. In your name I pray. Amen.